Hi everyone, I'm Miss Lydia from the Boston Library. Thank you so much for joining me today for our craft project. This week we are making a variety of different Christmas tree crafts. So the very first one we're going to start with is a really simple craft using a pine cone and a small terracotta pot. You can use anything that you want for the base as long as your pine cone will sit in it about like that. So what I'm doing is I'm taking my pine cone here and I'm going to paint the whole thing green. So I have a little bit of green acrylic paint here and a glass dish that I'm going to use. And first I'm going to tip it upside down so that my stem is at the top, and I'm going to paint the bottom. This is a very forgiving project, so if you don't get it perfectly covered in your green paint, that's totally fine. If you are using a terracotta pot like this, you can let this dry at this point, or if you're pretty sure you can be careful with it, you can actually stick that right inside to get it started. And then I'm going to paint it from here. I'm going to go around the outside first, and then I'm going to go down into my pine cone. So I've gone all the way around my pine cone here, and then what I'm going to try to do is get more paint down inside of that so that my pine cone is much more green than this. Once you have this coated as much as you want with the green, you can see I have it down inside and around the sides of it, but not as much on the bottom because you won't see that too much. And I'm okay with a little bit of the brown showing through. I'm going to set this aside to dry. Before your paint is dry, if you want to, this is a good time to add any glitter. You could also let the paint dry completely and then spray it with a light spray adhesive and use that as well. So I have a little bit of glitter here. These are little tiny star shapes, and I'm just going to sprinkle those on a little bit. I went fairly subtle with my glitter. You can see it adds just a little bit of sparkle. They kind of look like ornaments on that tree. And then I have a tiny little tree topper here that I'm going to use. You can use any type of star. So even if you have a star sticker, if you cut one out of construction paper, anything to top that off, and there is our little pine cone tree. You can also, of course, decorate the pot as well if you wanted to. Kind of like the more rustic look with the pine cone, so I'm going to leave mine natural. And there is our first tree project. Our next tree craft is a very simple project that you can make on any scale using any paper that you have. You can use skewers like I have here, or you can use toothpicks if you want to make them small. You could use a pencil, anything that you can use to stick through the center of this. So I'm using some scrapbooking paper here. And basically what I've done is I have cut out triangles. And what I'm going to do with my triangle then, so you can use again any size, I'm making these fairly large. I have my triangle and I'm going to do what's called an accordion fold. So I'm just going to start at the bottom and I'm going to fold it up about an inch like that. Then I'm going to tip it the other way and fold it back so that it's starting to look like a hat. So I'm basically just flipping it back and forth, and I'm trying to get my seam to match up. So each time I flip it over, so I have it, my fold here, I'm going to flip it over and fold it up. I'm going to flip it over and fold it up. Flip it and fold it. Until you end up with something that looks about like that. You can see the triangles on the inside here. And then you can see that once I straighten that back out, I have that fold. You want to make sure that your creases are nice and tight. That will keep the definition in it. With my tree still folded up like this, I'm going to take a hole punch and punch a hole all the way through, right in the center. So I have the tip of the tree that's folded up here, and I'm going to find the center of that with my hole punch, and I'm going to punch straight through that. Depending on the weight of your paper, you may have to do this in stages. The best way I found to do that is to try to push this hole punch in quite a bit, right where you want it, so that you end up getting a slight indent in it. And then I'm going to take about half the layers, find that same spot, and punch through it. Then I'm going to line that up with the next layer punch through that as well. Now I have a hole through the center of all of those layers. Then I'm going to take my skewer, stick that straight up through it, and straighten out my tree. Again, depending on the paper that you used and what type of a skewer you're using, it's probably going to just slide down like that. So then my next step is to glue it. So I have my hot glue gun. I'm going to stick my skewer up through and kind of secure it up at the tip right here. And on the back side, I'm just going to put a little dab of glue on each of these layers. And then you can kind of stretch it down to where you want it to sit. Once you've done that, hold it there until your hot glue is dry. And there you have another Christmas tree. These are really great to add to centerpieces. You can also add them to wreaths. You could put them on a stand and make a little forest out of them as well. So remember, you can use any type of paper for this project. You can also add stars to the top. I happen to be using some decorative scrapbooking paper. You could use old book pages, old sheet music, or even just construction paper or regular white paper that you color and draw on. So this is a really quick and easy project, and then you just have to figure out how you want to display them. Our next project also involves paper and a wooden skewer, or you can also use a pencil for this one. My base on this one is actually a spool of thread and a skewer through that, but you can use anything to stabilize this that you have on hand. So what I'm going to start with, again, you can use any paper. I have scrapbooking paper here, and I'm going to cut out 5 circles, and they have to be different sizes. So the best way I found to create my different sized circles is to use different sized bowls. So I have my biggest bowl here that I'm using, one that's a little bit smaller, one that's smaller still, and then 2 even smaller bowls, or whatever you can find that's going to be another size smaller. They don't have to be equally smaller. You can get away with a lot of variation in this. You just want to have them at decreasing sizes. So I'm going to start with my largest circle. So here I have my biggest circle that I'm going to be using, and I'm going to fold it in half. And I want to really crease this as much as I can. This one is actually one that works a little bit better with a lighter paper. So the scrapbooking paper is kind of hard to fold. A book page or sheet music might be a little bit easier to get a crisp fold on. So then, after I folded it in half, I fold it in half again. And then again. And then one more time. So I'm folding it in half a total of 4 times. It gets a little tricky on that last fold because you have a fairly thick piece of paper at this point. You want to try to get it to come to a point as much as possible there. And then I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to cut the tiny bit of the tip off. Once that tip is cut off, I'm going to open this back up and I'm going to do what is called a concertina fold. So I'm taking this back out, and you can see you could actually probably get away with it in this type of a fold, but what you want to try to do to get a more even look is to fold it so that it goes back and forth all the way around the circle. So one point comes up, one point goes down, one point comes up. And as you're doing this, you'll notice that you're actually bending some of those folds that you've already done the opposite direction. This is where you're going to really work to get that nice, crisp, clear edge. And it doesn't have to be all folded into itself, so you can work your way around and open up the back end and continue to work around, because once you get towards the far side, it's going to be too hard to hold it all together. Then once I'm done, I end up with a cone shaped like this. This is going to be the bottom layer of my tree. So I'm going to set that aside, and do the same exact thing with the rest of the circles. So the other 4 circles, I'm going to follow the same exact procedure. It does get a little trickier the smaller they get to get all of those folds in. So I'm folding it in half once, twice, 3 times, and the tricky 4th time. Then before I unfold it, I snip off that tip, unfold it, and redo the folds as my concertina fold back and forth. So your lines don't have to be perfect. So as long as you're getting that back and forth motion, even if your edges don't line up perfectly, you're still going to get a crisp seam and you'll still get the right look for it. And as you're opening it up, if you see one that isn't quite the right edge, you can go back and kind of do that fold again. So there I have my second layer. Continuing on. If you find with your top smallest circle that you can't fold it in half 4 times, you can get away with 3 folds in half. And then when you open it up, you'll either have less of the accordion fold, or once you've opened it up, you can get that accordion fold and fold it in half where you don't have a crease. It doesn't make a huge difference though in your look if you get all those folds in. So just doing that half fold, half fold, half fold 3 times, and then opening it up and doing your accordion fold will give you a reasonable look for the top. I have a skewer here that I've cut almost in half because I don't need quite the whole length of it. And then what I'm going to do is take my 5 layers and I'm going to stick the skewer right up through the center of them. So as long as I remember to cut those points out, it'll go straight up through. And then you have a tree that looks like this. Again, those layers are probably going to fall down on you. So what I would recommend is putting a little bit of glue up at your top and then sliding that top layer over top of it to get it to stick there. And then you might need to hold it for a second as that glue dries. Pull that last layer out. Again, stick a little bit of glue on the skewer and then slide the layer over top of it to where you want it to sit. By only gluing the top and bottom layers, you allow for a little bit of movement in it as well. Once your glue is dry, you can stick that skewer inside a spool of thread or whatever you're going to use to stabilize it. If you've made the skewer the right length, your layers will come right down over top of it, and then you won't even be able to see that base. And then feel free to add a star of some sort to the top of your tree. And here you have 3 simple Christmas tree crafts that you can do at home. We have our pine cone Christmas tree painted green with our glitter and tree topper, our accordion fold paper trees, and our little ruffled Christmas tree. If you have any questions, please comment below. It will help you out. We hope you enjoyed these projects.